we have a very special guest that's going to come in. He's a professor of theology at Iona University, and he is the author of Gospel of the Living Dead. He's going to be joining us on the program next. Dr. Kim Paffenroth, thank you very much for joining us on the Cutting Room tonight. Welcome aboard, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. We're fascinated with your novel, Gospel of the Living Dead, and you have such an amazing take on the whole, zombie genre, and particularly with the work of George Romero. One question I would like to ask you is, Romero basically, started the whole modern day, zombie thing, the whole look, the feel, and there's been a lot of copycats out there, some good, some bad. Romero had a little help with say people like Val Lewton, who started it in the 40s. What do you think is our society's real fascination with the zombie? I mean, why are we so drawn to these films? It amazes me that it draws such a big culture.
Yeah, and people keep predicting the end of it, don't they? I know when I first started writing about it, not everybody, but some people would say, "Oh, that's nice. They'll be going next year," and that was 2006, and it just keeps going. I guess I usually try to hit on three main points. I think zombies are just they answer a lot of primal fears, they respond to and correspond to a lot of primal fears that we have of death, of the dead. And obviously of violence and pain and the destruction of our society and of our own individual lives. So they got that whole kind of monster thing down in terms of what's going to scare people, right, 1,000 years ago or 1,000 years from now. And then I think what Romero did do to kind of kickstart it was identify them with more modern fears of alienation, lack of identity. I'm gonna become one of them, and I don't want to be one of them. And in that sense, he really had to reboot, the whole vampire thing, because in a way, everybody does want to be a vampire, right? They're cool, they're sexy, they're strong. They live forever in kind of a good way, whereas zombies live forever in kind of only the worst possible way. And then I think with the newest, the third point, with the newest reboot in the last, say, since 2000 or so, they've really started to correspond to more contemporary fears of terrorism, bioterrorism, end of the world. So I guess what I'm trying to say is they have both this primal appeal and they're able to adapt to a changing circumstance and to changing interests and fears that we have.
It's so amazing how, particularly with what Romero has done with all 6 of his movies, he really, really enjoys reflecting the times and commenting on the times. Do you find it fascinating at all that wasn't his intention at all with Night of the Living Dead, and he didn't really go into that type of filmmaking until Dawn of the Dead?
I do. I guess fascinating is the right word. I wouldn't. I think Night is a certainly very competent horror film, but you wouldn't have been able to foresee all the stuff that came afterwards, as you say, until you saw Dawn. And I think, actually, technically speaking, I'm one of the people who saw Dawn, I think, before I saw Night, or I saw them probably contemporaneously, almost at the same time. So for me, Dawn's always the one that I key into more, and that appeals to me more. And I think that is when he kind of hit his stride in terms, I don't want to say that he has a message, but because I know he'd sort of, poo-poo that idea too. But he certainly has. He had something more to do than just scare people. He'd done that in Night, and now he's trying to do something more to it.
Yeah, he's trying to draw social criticism into the film, where with Night of the Living Dead, it was left more ambiguous, and people sort of projected their ideas and metaphorical themes onto the film. Where in Dawn of the Dead, he doesn't deny that he was trying to infuse social criticism into the film, does he?
No, and I think you're right to draw the comparison with Night, where he does deny, at least as far as I know, and up until very recently, he's always denied that the racial overtones were there. He said it was just a complete accident. They cast a black man as the lead.
Right.
And of course, you can say that, but still watching the film, you can't deny this effect that it has on you. But I think with Dawn, he's really, and if anything, when people kind of fault the more recent ones like Diary, they say he's actually getting kind of a little heavy-handed with it. But I think with Dawn, the social message there, it's still a matter of what you're scared of, right? It's just that now you're not scared of being killed and eaten. You're scared of walking the mall for the rest of eternity.
Right.
Scary in a very different
Yes.
and I think deeper
Right.
way.
Well, satire plays such a huge role in, especially Dawn of the Dead.
Oh my God!
but
When they're
also in
wandering
a
at
lot
the
of-
end with the music playing. Oh my
Right.
God! Just cracks
Right.
me.
Yeah, I mean, don't you think it's just amazing how Romero, especially in that film, goes from, complete terror in like in the basement in the opening scene,
Right.
and then when they're throwing pies at each other, which you mentioned in your book actually, which is pretty funny.
It goes back and forth right up until the end, because I mean, when they're tearing the biker gang apart, you're sort of horrified, but then you're cracking up too, especially with the blood pressure machine and all. It's so he's really got. Again, when he's at his best, he has this really fine feeling for things being very finely balanced between, making you kind of nauseous and cracking you up at the same time.
I wonder.
Yeah.
I wonder if the pies in the face was any kind of homage to what Kubrick had intended to be the ending of Doctor Strangelove, in any way. Because you're
Was that what he had to? I do
Yeah.
remember reading
They
that,
filmed
Tom, you're
it.
right.
They actually
Yeah.
filmed it. There's production stills of George C. Scott with cream pie in the face.
That I did not know. I just know the regular, "We'll Meet Again" song playing over the mushroom clouds. But it is. I mean, I do think you're right that Kubrick and Romero do have that same kind of black humor.
absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Hey, Kim, in your book, you draw a parallel between Dante's Inferno and the vision of, I guess you call it Hell on Earth, of Romero's vision. Can you speak to that? And I read Dante's Inferno years ago, but I haven't read it since. But I found it interesting that the zombies, in your view, represent sort of the uncontrolled appetite
Yep.
or bodily sins, and we, the humans, represent something much deeper, which is pride. And I thought it was an interesting kind of analysis of a lot of his films and what he's up to.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean that's where I could get the best overlap, I guess, between theology professor and fan. I mean that's where it really kind of came together for me, because it seems to me the strength of Dante's vision is to make that, I think, pretty convincing distinction in sins, that the less bad sins, the not as bad sins, are ones that are just sins of urges, of appetites, lust, gluttony. He'd even include avarice. I'd be a little iffier on that, but definitely lust and gluttony look like natural desires that have just gotten out of hand. And he doesn't make excuses for them, but he definitely says they're way less serious than when he gets further down in Inferno and he sees people who are like actively hating, deceiving, and harming other people in this very diabolical, in all the various diabolical ways that they do. And when I applied that to the Romero films, or when I saw that being reflected in the Romero films, it was to say that, well, and especially by the time, I know you're trying to focus on the first three, but definitely by the time you're up to Land, where you're rooting for the zombies, it's because they really can't help themselves, and if anything, they're
more human.
They're kind of under some kind of control, right? They just want to be left alone and play their instruments or whatever the hell they do at the beginning there. And it's Hopper's character that's the one that really makes you cringe and say, "Oh, now that's really bad. That's a really bad person."
All right. Yeah, I mean, you make an interesting point. I think it's what's the one where they're underground? Day of the Dead.
Well, with Bob, I think you could too, right?
Right. That's where it starts. Yeah, absolutely.
He actually shows sorrow and remorse or mourning for the loss of the doctor.
Yeah.
And everybody else in the film, you make an interesting point in the book, is that everyone else is just the doctor is you draw parallels to Frankenstein, and it's like the sin of reason, I guess, and then there's the sin of power with Tom's favorite character, Rhodes.
Captain Rhodes, yeah,
Yep,
love him.
Yep. Joe Pilato, yeah. I mean, that's the perfect contrast. I mean, Bub is way more under control than Rhodes is by the end there. Right. I mean, Rhodes just shrieking orders at people and threatening to shoot people. Right. And, Bub actually a couple times refrains from biting somebody. And actually, when he kills Rhodes, it's not by biting him the way a zombie would. He shoots him and then leaves him to the other zombies.
Trying to shoot him, yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, it is interesting. Another thing that you pick up on, which I think goes back to Tom's first question, was the appeal of zombies or the horror of zombies is they look like us, So part of the terror isn't necessarily being attacked by them or dying. I guess you make a few different points there. It's becoming one of them,
Right.
and then also having to shoot or kill or whatever people who were your loved ones only a few minutes or a few hours before. I mean, it's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've definitely got. I guess now that I think about it and go over that data again, I guess you really have three different levels of added horror to the just being eaten part. Which again, I don't mean to minimize the horror of being eaten, but there's
Right.
plenty of examples. I mean, hell, I can watch Animal Planet now, and it's mostly when animals attack and this, that, and the other. So there's plenty of things that are going to eat us. But you have the added horror that, well, it's grandma that's going to try to eat you. That's pretty bad. And then you're going to have to shoot grandma, and that's going to be pretty bad too. And then if you don't get her in time, you're going to turn into this thing like her. And of course, then and then the fourth level would be, if we go back to the Dawn of the Dead and the whole mall walker thing, that thing that you become is just going to be this kind of slow, stupid, uncoordinated version of what you were to begin with, which is this kind of gross human being that doesn't have anything better to do than wander around the mall.
Right, and it's interesting. I think that's part of what opens up the films and zombies in particular. It invites you to sort of make parallels to what we are as a society and a culture.
And participation, and again, further the level of satire. I've just been amazed, even in the short time I've been involved with it, with how much zombie walks have taken off. And have really become very popular with young people as a way of participating in that.
Yeah.
I live in Brooklyn. I can attest to that. The zombie pub crawls are really interruptive to my drinking life.
That's funny, Billy.
Kim, I did have a question. In addition to the parallels in Dante's Inferno to the qualities of sin and the values of those, were there other theological motifs you see throughout the Romero zombie films?
Well, the main one is going back, I think, my two main points were the parallels between the zombies and the damned in Dante. And then the other parallel was to go back to the social criticism thing we were talking about earlier. And to take that back, I think, to the Old Testament prophets. I think that's a lot of what... I don't think Romero sees himself as that, but that's how I think, as a believer, when I see his work, that's what I tune into, is this person who's very articulate and very passionate and very incensed about the things that he sees wrong with his society. And
like an Isaiah or an Ezekiel proclaiming that God's going to throw down the city walls and lay waste to civilization. Partly
the destruction thing, but also partly what people have done wrong to deserve that. That's where I think the social criticism comes in either thing. So, I mean, for the ancient Hebrews, it was one set of what they saw as societal ills. For Romero, it's a slightly different set. And even within the Romero works, it evolves between the movies, as we've said. So that, by the time you're up into Diary, what is he making fun of there? He's making fun of the media, right? He was
making catalog of
the
sins.
Military. Exactly.
Yeah,
I think Survival, he's just making fun of himself because it's such a bad movie.
It becomes auto-referential at that
point. Well, I think to that point, Kim. I think it was Dawn of the Dead. One of the characters says, "We brought this on ourselves," or "We did this to ourselves," or something to that effect.
That's what Fran says early on, and then Peter says, about 2/3 of the way into the movie, in the kind of the iconic line, he says, "They're us." So that's kind of the big tagline for zombies eating people.
Oh, you did mention the poster. Is that what's the poster line? I forget what it was.
And there's no more room in hell. The dead will walk the earth.
That's it. Yeah,
that's the one from Dawn. I almost like the one from Land more, where it says the dead shall inherit the earth.
Yeah. and don't forget the classic one from Day of the Dead. I said, "Shut up." by the great Paffenroth.
I guess Pilato just goes around saying that now at conventions.
Yeah, I think one thing that actually Tom was interested in, I was talking to him earlier, Kim, was how you, or I guess how your colleagues deal with you, and what they think of your kind of sideline here with your infatuation with pop culture and zombie movies. Because I know, you're very accomplished academic and a writer and everything, and all of a sudden you start writing about zombies. I wonder if there's some interesting interactions among your colleagues at Iona.
Right. You can never speak for what is said behind your back, I suppose. But I guess two things. I mean, I don't know if it was deliberate, but I probably didn't feel personally comfortable doing that stuff until I had established myself, and I could say, well, here I've done the regular stuff. I've done what I'm supposed to do. Now if I have these kind of more quirky interests, that's going to be okay. I'm not going to be looked down on for that.
Gotcha.
But at the same time, I do have to say, when I started the whole work, part of it was because I noticed there was a lot of work on pop culture and either philosophy or theology, and showing how pop culture has these deeper meanings and messages, and how people can just appreciate it and relate to it, not just on a surface entertainment type level. I mean, there's been a lot of books on either the philosophical or the religious connotations of a lot of pop culture. Usually stuff I think that's maybe not quite as dark as zombies. I mean, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, those kinds of things. So yeah, I took it in a little bit darker direction, but I don't think anything that people wouldn't say, that's interesting. I would I would look at zombie movies maybe a little bit differently now, having heard what you have to say. And on the other hand, from the fan side, I think a lot of people say to me, that's what I've been saying all along, that zombies should be taken seriously. So I think the fans are more open to and really very appreciative of having people take their obsession seriously, because it does have something there.
Yeah. I mean, back where religion were the myths of the populations of the past. I mean, to a very real degree, in a certain extent, our myths today are the movies and the pop culture. So it kind of stands to reason that you would sort of try to draw parallels and try to understand it from a theological standpoint.
Excellent point. I think movies. Oh, I don't know what it is now, I guess, with the television and that, but definitely thinking of my father, he just so identified with movies so much, and later in his life he really turned away from and really kind of rejected religion, but you could tell that he did seek meaning elsewhere, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. Right.
Max, do you have anything for Dr. Paffenroth?
Well, I'm listening to The Good Doctor, and I'm like, whoa, this dude has like a third eye in his forehead or something. I mean, you don't sound like a dumb shit. That's number one. Number two,
such praise I get on the show.
I want to know where this personally comes for you, because you just talked about your daddy, and I never knew my daddy, but I was absolutely gripped by what you were saying about him. These films, for you, are they a historical response, an emotional response, a spiritual response? I mean, why do you, and I haven't had the good fortune of reading your book, and I damn well want to get on that, but why do you care so much?
I think you're right to make everything's personal in some way, I guess, whether we admit it or not. I mean, I think the way I've unpacked it thus far for myself is I mean, when you gave me the various choices of the different kinds of responses, I guess I would say, look, when I saw Dawn of the Dead in a theater when I was 13, it was a very visceral fanboy type response, very adolescent male response. And then, probably for I think I saw Day on VHS, so Dawn might have been the only one I ever saw in theatrical release and then I really didn't think about zombies during my adulthood. And by the time I went back and started thinking about them again, which that date I can pinpoint, that was the Dawn of the Dead remake. I saw the ads for that late at night when I was watching Law and Order reruns, like all middle-aged people. I saw the ads for that Dawn of the Dead remake, and I just went nuts. That was like one of the few movies I've been to at the 11 a.m. matinee opening day, and I was just nuts for that. And I would hope that in the intervening, whatever that is, 20-some years, or 20, I guess, 20 years between Day and the Dawn of the Dead remake, I had, I still could have that very immature, visceral response of like zombies are cool, and just want to see that, and also have some ability to step back and say, well, okay, now I'm old enough to articulate why they're cool and why I want to do this and why I think other people are doing this along with me and getting something out of this.
Did you see the original Dawn with your dad?
Yeah, I very distinctly remember that because it was if you remember, that was released as an NC-17 some places and was released as kind of a hard R, and it was left open to the theater. They hadn't given it a rating because they were going to get an NC-17 if they put it through. So it was released unrated. And the individual.
We're talking about the new Dawn or the old Dawn?
The old, right?
The old. Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
The original Dawn was released without a rating, so it was up to the individual theater owner what he would do.
I see.
So I actually had to hunt around to find a place that was going to show it as an R and let me in with my father. And I do remember he went in and he didn't normally humor my obsessions but for some reason he went along with that to the point of going in, sitting me down and saying, okay, I'm going to go outside and smoke a cigarette. I don't want to see this. So I sat there and watched the damn thing and met him outside and so he was a good sport that time.
Oh, so my theory that it was an emotional experience with your father is out the window.
Oh, in terms of bonding, no, not that. No. I can think of movies that I did bond with him over, but not that. No.
Do you have a son?
Yes. Yes.
Do you show your son these films?
He hasn't shown that huge response. I mean, he's not against horror films the way my daughter is, but he hasn't. They haven't really ignited his imagination. I don't think in the way that they did me. I do think, in some sense, it is a very personal response.
It's very individual.
Yeah, so it's kind of a bummer you don't get to. If your daughter's against horror and your son is like not into it, it's kind of a bummer for you, right? What about your wife?
This is what conventions are for, isn't it?
No. It sounds pretty personal, though, for you. That's what I'm getting. This sounds like a really personal. You wrote a whole book. Do you know what a pain in the ass it is to write a book?
He's wrote many books.
Just always searching. He's shining a flashlight into the dark side of the moon at every opportunity.
No. As I say, everything in some way is personal, and so I can't cop out on saying that my fascination with the dark side and with people eating other people is not personal or some merely objective kind of anthropological interest of mine. No, it does resonate with me in some way. I agree.
I mean, your fascination with the dark side, it must be interesting to consider in terms of, thinking about theology so much. And obviously you can't pull away, all good things about religion without looking into and investigating the darker sides of humanity and theology itself, right?
That's always been how I approach it. And again, it's something where I know other people approach it in very different ways. Other people, I think, when they talk about their faith, or they talk about their belief, or when they're, God forbid, if they're trying to actually convert somebody, which I never try to do, I find the things that they say about religion to be awfully kind of, I don't know.
Milquetoast?
Thank you. I was going to say naive or, insipid. Boy, I'm getting worse as I go here. Treacly. Right? I mean, I usually use the example that footprints in the sand poster, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, look, if you believe that, I'm not going to try to put down your belief or anything, but when I read that, I'm like, no, that's not how I experience life. And so I've always wondered what my version of footprints in the sand. I guess they'd be like bloody, like body parts in the sand,
littered with
pieces. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Dr. Kim, do you have a fear of death?
That is not. Again, boy, you all like to make things personal. Yeah, I mean, look, my mom died when I was little, so I think in a way, I don't know if I don't have a fear of it. I would never be that arrogant to say I'm not afraid of it. But I guess I'm kind of more used to it.
Have you ever suffered a terrible disease that you were afraid that your mortality was? Not yet.
But having watched her go through that at a fairly young age, I do assume that's a possibility. Or I know it's a possibility. I know that it's out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's been a question that I've been meaning to bring up on the show, fellas, was the fear of death being such an integral part of horror film watching and our love of horror films. Just coming to terms with the fear of death, which I think Dr. Kim actually brings in quite often into his book, but it was something that I've been waiting for the perfect moment to spring on all of you guys, actually, as like at the right moment. But Max, you did it here, right with a guest sitting at our dinner table too.
Well, it's his fault. He's so awesome.
That's awesome, man.
Like I said, I would never be so arrogant as to say I'm not afraid of death, because I don't think anybody gets away from that ultimate fear. But I guess what I was trying to say with my own personal experiences, I'm a little bit more familiar with it. I've seen that, so it doesn't hold quite as much, I guess, mystery to me.
Mm-hmm.
Cremation or coffin? Cremation or coffin? Dr. Kim, one or the other. What do you want?
Jesus.
Yeah, cremation. I never understood
That's what
the
I say, right?
fascination. I never understood the fascination with sticking around. Although I guess we're going to, I guess we have to continue being morbid. The topic of the show being what it is, I do very much like visiting my grandparents' grave.
Yeah.
So I do kind of like the thing I miss about cremation is the lack of I mean, I know that sometimes they put the ashes somewhere, but there does seem to be something nice and concrete about cemeteries that I actually like visiting them in that sense.
It's a very
Me too,
powerful
me too.
symbol, the cemetery.
Yes,
It hits
exactly.
something deep in us, and it's hard to explain.
I think it's more for the survivors. Yeah, it definitely
Yeah,
gives you a place to
absolutely.
go and some sense of, I don't know, closure and completion, and again, a sense of returning too.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I got yelled at for wearing activewear walking through a cemetery, like taking a walk. And I was trying to say, you have no idea how much I respect the dead and how much I enjoy being here. But some gateskeeper, I don't know who he was, he's like, what are you jogging through? I'm like, I'm not jogging, I'm walking. But it was because I was wearing activewear. He thought I was being disrespectful to the dead. And I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was
No.
embracing this experience.
Again, I do think it is very personal, and I can see
Well, I
where
don't wanna make
some
you
people
feel-
think some people would find someone else's way of expressing closure and grief. They might find it alien or whatever, but I don't think they should be judgmental in that way.
Yeah.
Dr.
Like one
Paffenroth.
very strange phenomenon I saw that I have to tell you about. It's not that strange, but I guess it's strange to Americans. Is I visited Rome for the first time last year on a school trip with some students, and all over the place in Rome, because it was some, and I'm not an expert on Renaissance art, but as we saw more and more of it as we went, you began to see that the big theme in Renaissance art was this fascination with death, with skeletons,
Yeah.
and this memori morti, memori mori,
Mm-hmm.
right? Know how to die, yeah. So they were always showing people embracing a skeleton or being kissed by a skeleton. It was, and on the one hand, it was creepy, beautiful, seductive, all at the same time, kind of thing.
Right.
I'm unzipping my fly right now.
Oh, I don't know.
Max.
Talk about goat fucking, will you?
No
for a minute?
goats. Yeah.
Hey, Doctor, thank you so much for coming on our program tonight and talking to us about Romero and zombies and death and your
Life.
and your father and everything. It was really nice of you to. Can you lead our listeners over to where they could check out?
How do
some of
I get your
novels?
book, for the love of God?
Everything's on Amazon. You could have one easy portal onto Amazon would be to go to my blog, which is Gospel of the Living Dead abbreviated, so gotld.blogspot.com.
Now, don't send me to a blog that you don't update on a regular basis. That makes me crazy.
I'm probably down to updating it only about once a week, but I hope that's
Good for you.
enough for you.
Good.
Okay.
That's enough.
If you go to the sidebar, lists all the books, gives you it's the Amazon link. I don't sell the books myself off of the site, but it'll take you to the Amazon link, and you can take care of it there.
And I highly recommend the book for anybody who loves Romero or zombies or horror pictures in general. It's really well written, really insightful. And yeah, I had a blast reading it.
Thanks
I'll
so
be
much.
checking it out. I'll be reading it. Can't wait.
Thank you,
guys.
Doctor. Yeah, thank you very much for joining the program tonight, my friend. Maybe we get back to talk about some more films soon.
Shoot me an email anytime, and we'll set it up.
A pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Doc.
Talk to you later.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Definitely. Bye-bye. That was Dr. Paffenroth of Iona University, and his novel is Gospels of the Living Dead.
Yeah, it's not a novel, but it's
I'm
a
sorry,
great
his
book.
book.
About
His
Romero.
book.
Yeah,
His non-fiction epic.
yeah,
All right, folks.